if they bait and switch us in that way just to make some kind of declarative identity politics statement, you are going to disappoint a lot of people because, like I said, He-Man is all over the marketing for this thing. And he is the star of that trailer. So I'm just saying, if you do that, you're setting yourselves up for disappointment and an angry fan base that's going to yell at you because people clearly want to see He-Man.
How does it feel to have lived long enough to see all of your favorite franchises go down in flames?
Feels great.
Yes, it does feel great, let me tell you. It feels absolutely wonderful to watch the things that you enjoyed as a kid be absolutely destroyed in the modern age. It's a wonderful time to be a fan of things. So, there's a lot to get through in this video, a lot I wanted to cover, a lot of ground. A couple of things ranging from the new not He-Man show, the Snake Eyes movie, Space Jam 2, and then some huge wrestling developments that have taken place for both WWE and AEW, and I wanted to cover them all right here in one video. There's going to be a lot of rambling, there's going to be a lot of ranting, because goddammit, I have a lot to get through, but we're going to get through it, and hopefully you all enjoy the ride. So let's just tackle the elephant in the room right now. Masters of the Universe Revelations, brought to us by the wonderful jolly nerd man Kevin Smith. The newest show on Netflix, newest animated program on Netflix, based on the classic property that I personally have been a lifelong fan of. I've talked about it in previous videos I've done. I did do my top 20 favorite episodes of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, the classic Filmation series. I am a fan of this property. If you've never watched my videos before and you're not aware of how far the dorkiness and the nerdiness I have for Masters of the Universe goes, it runs pretty deep. It's something that I am a lifelong fan of, so much so that I don't remember ever being introduced to it. Very much like Star Wars, it's something that's always been there. I don't remember not knowing what it was. It's a nice, comfortable blanket woven out of childhood memories and nostalgia. It's something I have a lot of fondness for. And so when I heard that this show was coming to Netflix, initially, obviously it piqued my interest. But with anything new that comes on board based on a pre-established property, there's also some trepidation and nervousness. And I wasn't aware of this, but there was some online drama going on between Kevin Smith and Clownfish, who I'm not overly familiar with, but apparently they leaked. They had a source involved with the behind-the-scenes aspect of the show that told them that the show was not going to be about He-Man, it was going to be focused on Teela. And Kevin Smith basically called them liars and said, no, we're not doing that at all, blah, blah, blah. And there was a bit of a shitfest going on online, which I was unaware of. And lo and behold, Clownfish was right, and they are owed a massive apology because they were absolutely on the money about what this show ultimately was and who it was catering to, and it is a gigantic slap in the face to anyone that was ever a fan of He-Man, the classic show, the toy line, the comics, whatever. It's just a gigantic slap in the face to all the fans. I do have one friend of mine who is also a pretty big Masters of the Universe fan, and we talked to each other this morning, actually. I'm filming this on Saturday night, and we talked to each other this morning. We were on the phone for 2 hours, going back and forth, point by point, of everything that Kevin got wrong, and everybody involved in the writing aspect of the show got wrong in creating this show. And in some ways, it falls in line with many of the other reboots that have happened in recent years. In some ways, it made mistakes that were just completely baffling. The biggest overall problem is that the show relies so heavily on you having a ton of pre-established knowledge of Masters of the Universe, and not just the original show, because they sold this as a sequel to the Filmation series, which it's not, because it breaks from the original series in many ways. But if you don't know the toy line, the classic toy line, the mini comics, the original series, or even some of the 2002 series that makes it into the show, if you don't understand all of that stuff, you don't have all that lore, you're going to be fucking lost, and nothing's going to mean anything to you. But then, so it's like, all right, only diehard fans are going to be able to understand half of what's going on. But even then, they tell the fans to go fuck themselves. So it's like, I don't know who this show was even for. Because you lured us in, you used knowledge that only fans would have, and then you basically told them to go fuck themselves. It's one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. Absolutely, completely ridiculous. And I'm going to give some credit to Powerhouse Animation Studios, who obviously did the animation for the show. Their shows typically look great. This is no exception. I think this is probably the weakest of their efforts when you compare it to Castlevania and Blood of Zeus. But it still looks really good, and that was not something I was worried about, especially when I saw that first teaser, and I was like, oh, Powerhouse Animation is involved in this? Great. I'm like, all right, it's going to look good. And the show looks good, I'll give it that. So they are not at fault here. They did the absolute best with what they were given and made the show look as good as possible. And in many ways, they captured the look of the classic toys, where, again, that's another thing where it's like, oh, it's a sequel to the Filmation series. Yeah, but it has more the look of the classic toys than anything else. But I digress. And the voice cast is mostly pretty good, like I suspected given when I first saw the cast. He-Man's pretty good. Tony Todd as Scareglow is pretty good. Orko's pretty good. Liam Cunningham as Man-at-Arms. Duncan is really good. A lot of people are complaining about Mark Hamill as Skeletor and that he basically sounds like the Joker, which is a fair complaint. I think that's probably Kevin Smith telling him to just do the Joker, if I was going to guess, because Kevin Smith is a massive Batman fan. And part of me feels like he just had Mark in the booth. He just told him to play Joker, didn't he? I have a feeling that's what happened here. Because another weird instance of that happened with Merman, who was voiced by Kevin Conroy, who voiced Batman in Batman the Animated Series. And he sounds like Batman. And if there's a character in Masters of the Universe who shouldn't sound like Batman, it's probably Merman, the fish guy. And I'm like, that's an odd choice. And I feel like Kevin just told him, just do Batman. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense at all. Joker and Skeletor, there's at least some connection there, but what? What are you doing? But by and large, I think the voice cast is mostly good. Evelyn, really good. It's Lena Headey doing the voice. I was excited about that casting. And she did not disappoint. She did, again, the best with the material that she was given. So yeah, from a technical standpoint, there's a lot to admire as far as the animation goes. And the voice cast, again, does the very best they can with the material that they're given, for the most part. Everything else, as far as the writing goes, is so off base that it's downright shocking and insulting. And I was reading one review, because you'll notice when I posted the Rotten Tomatoes scores, and this is a perfect example of why I stopped trusting Rotten Tomatoes years ago, because there's been this obvious divide that keeps happening where critically it does really, really well, 94%. Which is the score it has as I'm filming this. But then the audience score is really, really low. And that it happened with 2016 Ghostbusters. It happened with Lily Singh's show. It happened with anything where they're trying to push some kind of a... And I cannot believe that this is happening with He-Man of all things. But when they're trying to push some kind of a socio-political agenda, and they know they're supposed to go one way with it, they will just give it a good review regardless, and just to kind of win favor. And typically this happens with some Disney properties as well, where Disney kind of gets a pass on making lesser projects. Part of that is also brand loyalty to Disney, I think. It happened with The Last Jedi. A lot of people are comparing the show to The Last Jedi, and I think it's a fair comparison, to be perfectly honest. But it's the audience score is getting to a point where, to me, and they can put forth accusations of review bombing and all this other stuff. And I posted a review. I created an account for the sole purpose of posting a review. But I didn't do it just to be a troll. I did it because I'm a lifelong He-Man fan. I saw the show and I'm like, this is bullshit. Like, this is absolute bullshit. And I was mad. And I think, isn't that what the audience score is for? Expressing when you're mad? Or expressing when you enjoyed something? Maybe I should write 10 other reviews just to balance it out. But I was just so angry. It's like, I need to do something. But I did create an account just to write a review, but I didn't do it to troll. I did it to express my legitimate problems with the show. And the audience score, I feel like, is probably more trustworthy than the critic score at this point, because critics have proven that they can be compromised. And if they're going into something with a particular slant, they're going to go that way regardless of the actual quality of what they're being presented with. And so critics, to me, are no longer trustworthy, which is very unfortunate, but it's the world we're living in right now. And really, because I don't trust the critic score, I'm going to trust what the He-Man fans are saying, and most of us are very unhappy, as we should be. Now, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't even know where to start with this, but I guess the biggest problem right off the bat is in that first episode, which starts off, for the most part, really good. It's kind of like the ultimate action figure battle, where it's like, it's the dream scenario of anybody who played with Masters of the Universe toys as kids, and like the battles that you would concoct using your action figures. It has most of the classic characters, and there's a big battle at Castle Grayskull with the heroes and the villains, and it's very exciting and well done. He-Man gets involved and does a lot of cool stuff. Skeletor gets involved and does a lot of cool stuff. There's some issues along the way, like the Sorceress being an idiot and opening Castle Grayskull for Faker disguised as He-Man. And yes, Faker, classic character from the original toy line, didn't do much in the original cartoon show, but pre-existing thing, an evil robot clone of He-Man. However, and again, this is one of those things where it's like, are you really... This isn't a sequel to the Filmation series, because in the Filmation show, the Sorceress would have never opened Castle Grayskull for He-Man, because He-Man knows the magic words to open the drawbridge. So it's like, she would never have opened the gate just because she saw He-Man. That never would have happened. Because He-Man can get into Castle Grayskull by himself, and the Sorceress knows this. I'm like, this is basic security. I mean, come on. You use your credentials to get in. You don't just expect people on the inside to open the door for you. That's piggybacking. We don't do that. But little issues like that, and Castle Grayskull has a basement that's a forest that apparently Mossman lives in, and I'm like, what the hell is that? That doesn't make any sense. When has Mossman ever lived in Castle Grayskull's basement? I don't know. But anyway, but other than those things, like, generally it's a very exciting, action-packed opening episode, and it's like, okay, I'm enjoying this, and then it happens. So Skeletor kills Mossman, who literally comes on screen and then is killed 10 seconds later by Skeletor, and I'm like... Again, that's another one of those things where it's like, if you're new coming into this, you're going to ask, who the fuck is Mossman? And as a fan, I'm like, well, I know who Mossman is. I don't know why he's in Castle Grayskull's forest basement. That's new. And I also don't know why He-Man is super, super upset over his death to the point where he kills fucking Skeletor, which I was like, He-Man would never kill Skeletor. And if they want to get that, like, visceral reaction where He-Man is so pissed off that he would lose himself and do that, it's like, all right, then it's got to be someone, like, super important to him, like Orko, or Man-at-Arms, or Teela, or one of his parents, or maybe even the Sorceress. Not Mossman. I'm like, Mossman's never been that important of a character to invoke that kind of response out of He-Man anyway. So He-Man stabs Skeletor, which starts a chain reaction because by stabbing Skeletor, the sword also stabbed the orb that contains the power of Grayskull and is going to cause a universe-wide explosion, and He-Man has to separate the sword into two halves to prevent utter chaos and destruction. And in the process, he reveals a secret identity to everyone, including Teela. And that's kind of the genesis of the story. It's also revealed that Castle Grayskull is not real. It's a hologram for the Hall of Wisdom, which makes absolutely no sense, because it's like, why is Castle Grayskull a disguise when Skeletor's trying to break into the castle anyway, so what exactly are you disguising? I don't know if they were referencing the 2002 series with the Hall of Wisdom. I don't know if this was like some kind of meta commentary of like, oh, they're all a bunch of liars, man, and or what. I don't know what they were going for, but whatever it was, it made no goddamn sense, because disguising Castle Grayskull gives them no tactical advantage at all whatsoever. So that made absolutely no sense to me. And the Hall of Wisdom is actually a pretty nice looking structure, so why would you make it look like a scary piece of crap like Castle Grayskull? I mean, Castle Grayskull is very cool looking, but it's like, you know, it's kind of a rundown, like, stony castle. Like, what's the point of the disguise? I don't understand that switch up at all. And so anyway, Teela finds out that Adam was He-Man all along, and now he's dead, and Skeletor's supposedly dead. And then this leads to a thing where the king and queen find out that their son is dead and that he was He-Man all along. And Randor, who is a total asshole in the few minutes that he's on screen, banishes Duncan, Man-at-Arms, and Teela just fucking rage quits. Like, y'all a bunch of assholes, and I wasn't in on the secret. So there, fuck y'all. Peace out. I'm out of here. And this is like, oh, God, we're in trouble. I knew right there at the end of that first episode, we are in trouble. This is going to get bad because, yes, this is the Teela show that was rumored to be like a year ago. It is, in fact, the Teela show. And it's not good. It's not good at all. And here's the problem. If you want to do a show where He-Man and Skeletor are removed from the story, which is a bold up move, because let me tell you, my favorite characters in Masters of the Universe have always been Skeletor, He-Man, and Battle Cat. And guess who's barely in this show? He-Man, Skeletor, and Battle Cat. So that's a bold choice, good sirs. But if you want to do the Death of Superman thing, where He-Man's no longer there and you get to see what the world is like without him around, okay, you can tell that story and I'll go along with it. And it's like, look, Transformers the movie, I love that movie, the 1980s Transformers movie. I adore that movie. That had the very bold choice of killing off Optimus Prime at the end of the first act. And it's like, what the hell is happening? To say nothing for all the other Autobots that were brutally murdered. But it's like the new characters I liked, and I think you can kind of see where I'm going with this. The new characters that took their places, that took Optimus Prime's place, like I kind of like Hot Rod in the movie. I love Cup. I love Springer. I love RC. I think most of the new characters work out pretty well. But then you get into Masters of the Universe. You've removed He-Man entirely and decide to focus on Teela. Teela in this show, what they did to her is pretty much character assassination because they made her so fucking unlikable, whiny, angry, self-entitled, petulant, just borderline narcissistic, spoiled brat, like just the most unlikable character in the entire show, and she is the main focus of it. And I guess this is how strong women are expected to be written now. I mean, at this point, I think it's become almost like a cliche and a joke. It's like, all right, this pandering, aren't you? Even the ones that defend this type of shit, aren't you sick of it at this point? Because it's just kind of the same thing over and over again, is it not? But let me tell you something about Teela and my experiences with that same character watching the original show and playing with the toys. I loved Teela as a character in the original show. When I did my top 20 episodes, I picked many of the Teela Spotlight episodes as among my favorites. Teela's Quest, Teela's Triumph, and The Witch and the Warrior. All very good episodes that focus on Teela. And they're great. And I think to imply that, first of all, I read one review that said that, one of the critical reviews that was trying to defend the show, said that this show gives the female characters agency that the original show never did. And I'm like, that is so disrespectful to the original show. You didn't watch it. You just straight up didn't watch it. Because let me tell you, Teela was very important to that original show. And she was great. And a hero. And a noble character who had a short fuse. She would get frustrated with Adam. But it was believable because she didn't know Adam was He-Man. And that was a bridge that the original show never crossed, unfortunately. Where it's like, all right, what is she going to do when she finds out that Adam is He-Man? Which I think is a great question to explore. And the Teela character that I knew, I think she would be angry. I think she would be hurt. But she would not abandon her duties and basically tell the whole planet to fuck off. They get to a point in the story where the Sorceress and Evil Lyn get together. It's like, look, because of what happened between He-Man and Skeletor and the Power Sword being broken in two, and then, okay, so the sword was broken inside Castle Grayskull, but then the two halves magically disappeared and went back to where they were originally forged. I'm like, how did that happen? And I don't know, just magic did it. It's become like the Force in Star Wars now, where it's gotten so ridiculous. Like, Force did it. Fuck it, whatever. Yeah, magic just did it. They just went back. They just disappeared right after He-Man and Skeletor did. And I'm like, all right, fine, whatever. But anyway, so Evelyn and Sorcerers are putting together a team to find the two halves of the sword, reforge it, and then restore magic to Eternia, because magic in Eternia is fading away. And then eventually, Eternia will die, and then the whole universe will die, because Eternia was the center of all creation. So universe-wide destruction, and Teela initially is like, you know what, fuck you, I'm not doing it. And it's like, what part of the entire universe is going to die do you not understand? And again, the Teela that I knew from the original show would never abandon her post. She would never stop being noble, and she would never tell the whole world to fuck off. That would not happen. She wouldn't disrespect her father, which she does. When she meets up with Duncan again, she keeps calling him Duncan as a way to, like, jab at him. And I'm like, this is hurting my heart. Both for Man-at-Arms, Duncan, and what they're doing to Teela as a character. Because she is so unlikable right now because she feels entitled to know Adam's secret. And it's like, look, the classic Teela, I think, would have been angry and confused. But she also would still try to make things right, and it wouldn't have never been like, there wouldn't have been a question that she would have given up being captain of the Royal Guard, which that's another thing. There's like this talk that like Teela and Evelyn, they get to a talk with each other. It's like the men in our lives held us back, and we held a torch for them, and they kept us from being all that we could be. And it's like, Teela was captain of the Royal Guard. She was captain of the Royal Guard. I mean, how much farther can she possibly go? And she's destined to become the Sorceress, which they drop hints for that in this show, and it's like, oh god, they're gonna go down that road too. And see, now if they did the story where if like Teela found out she's supposed to be the new sorceress because the current sorceress is her mom, that would be interesting, because I could see Teela saying no, because it's like, no, that's not what I want to do. I want to keep being the captain of the Royal Guard. Like, you know, I could see that, but this whole, like, her being completely butthurt over not knowing Adam's secret, to me, is just a complete overreaction, to the point where she's like, fuck the entire world, and fuck the family that I've known, and fuck all my friends, and fuck everything. And it's like, this is ridiculous. And Evelyn, that's another thing where it's like, dude, her whole plot in the classic series was to eventually overthrow Skeletor. She was using Skeletor to get to the top, and then she was going to stab him in the back first chance she got. Like, that was her whole plan. And the 2002 series, to its credit, actually paid that off and had her actually pull the trigger and do it. And there are other episodes of the original series where she is actually working independently of Skeletor. Ordeal in the Darklands, Eternal Darkness, the Defection, I think it's called, where she's working with villains independently of Skeletor. So she had her own motivations and her own plans. And there are ones where she's actually like the star villain, like the Shaping Staff and No Job Too Small and The Littlest Giant and various other things. I'm a big dork for the classic series, and I know the episodes pretty well. So when I hear Kevin Smith go on a gigantic rant about how we're all fake fans, I'm like, fuck you, buddy. I've forgotten more about He-Man than you'll ever know. Don't even try with me. But I think to say that the classic series didn't give the female characters any kind of agency, and this show does, I think is a complete misrepresentation of that classic show, and it's shameful. I think it's disrespectful and ridiculous. And it's a shame to the classic characters. Evelyn fares a little bit better than Teela does, but Teela, who is the main focus of the show, is just so goddamn unlikable. And something that I caught on to, I haven't seen a whole lot of people bring this up, but the first episode opens with a ceremony where Teela is going to be crowned the new Man-at-Arms. She's going to be knighted the new Man-at-Arms. And then later on in the show, when they put their little Fellowship of the Sword together, and they're going to go find the two halves of the sword, it's like, we need someone to reforge the sword. We need a weapons master. So they go looking for Duncan. And immediately in my mind, I'm like, Teela, you were knighted man of arms. You're supposed to be a weapons master now. And so I guess she got promoted to a position without being qualified for it. They inadvertently made Teela like a joke. And because I'm sure that wasn't their intention, but it's like, oh, so she got promoted to a position that she was not qualified for. Okay, good to know. Very good to know. And again, the way she acted throughout the entire thing also completely justified Adam's decision not to tell her he was He-Man. Like, because It's like, why didn't you tell me? Because you're an overly emotional, self-entitled rage beast that just quit at the drop of a hat because you found out a secret of mine. By the way, as I died saving the universe, it's like, her reaction was just so over the top, and the way they wrote her was just so unlikable that it completely ruined the show for me. And again, I would have been down for a Death of Superman style story with He-Man. But choosing to focus on this version of Teela that is not Teela, not any version of Teela I've ever known, was a complete and utter mistake and completely ruined any goodwill that the show had. And they also did a bunch of weird things, like Triclops is the head of a mechanical cult. Like Triclops and some of the other Snake Mountain Skeletor minions, they formed their own cyborg cult, which again, some good animation, shows some good body horror of people becoming cyborgs. But it also is like, we reject magic, and we are only technological, and we become one with the motherboard, as they say. So drink this magic chalice, this magic black goo, and it will turn you into a cyborg. And I'm like, so they reject magic, but they drink a magic potion to become a cyborg? What am I watching right now? Oh, it's just like, they've just taken logic and just thrown it out the window. And, throughout the show, there are also flashbacks to He-Man and Teela's previous adventures. And those are depressing to watch because it's like, man, this is the show we could be watching right now. But no. And they kind of have like the lighthearted, cheesy tone of the original show. I was like, dude, if you just made a lighthearted, like, cheesy action show with better animation than what Filmation could do back in the day, I'd have been okay with that. But you decided to do all this shit. So the things they did just depressed me wholeheartedly, and it just ruined any and all potential that this show had. And it's made even worse in the very little that we get with Prince Adam. He's so likable. Like, that's the biggest problem. It's like, you chose not to focus on him, you chose Teela. She is thoroughly unlikable, and Adam, in the little bit that we get with him, is super, super likable. There's a few moments that, had I not been pissed off by everything else, probably would have brought a tear to my eye. We meet up with Orko, who's like a clownfish in their review. They call him, he's like a sick kid with cancer that's dying. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of what Orko is in this show. But they do something to his character that I also didn't like, which I'll bring up in a minute. But he brings up Adam at one point, and he literally starts fucking crying. And I'm like, oh my god, that hurts my heart, because Adam and Orko were like best friends, and that stuff works for me. Then there's part of the plot. Okay, so the two Power Sword halves got magically transported to basically what are heaven and hell, which the show explicitly states as heaven and hell. Subternia, which was never hell in any version of Masters of the Universe that I knew. Subternia, in the 2002 series, was just the underground territories run by the Caligars and the Spilians. It was just another area on Eternia. It wasn't hell, but apparently it's run by Scareglow, who's kind of cool, and it's cool to see Scareglow in animation for the first time. But again, that whole story falls flat because it's all about showing your fear and confronting your fears. And Teela's greatest fear apparently is being too awesome. And I'm like, what? How can I connect with any of this? And then the equivalent of heaven is Preternia, which was supposed to be the setting for a canceled Powers of Grayskull toy line that was supposed to happen in the 1980s that never got released. And it was supposed to be the setting of Eternia in the past. So you'd see like He-Man riding dinosaurs and shit. Kind of cool. Some of the ideas were cool. I wish the line got produced. But it was supposed to introduce Hero, who was like a prehistoric version of He-Man, the most powerful wizard in the universe. But they've recontextualized it here as basically He-Man Heaven. So all the previous Grayskull champions and guardians get to go to this paradise. It's essentially the equivalent of like Valhalla or something like that. And there's Adam is the only one of the He-Man style guardians. There's King Grayskull, there's Vicor and Wonderbread He-Man. Don't ask, I'm not going to explain what any of those things are because I'm trying to keep this as concise as possible. While I'm already aware I've been rambling for half an hour. But Adam is the only one that decided to stay as Adam. And I was like, immediately in my brain, knowing what I know from the Filmation He-Man, I was like, that is so Adam. Yes. Because they explain that when you go to He-Man Heaven, I'm just going to keep calling it He-Man Heaven, because why not? When you choose to go to He-Man Heaven, you get to choose which form you get to enter as, either your powered up form or your depowered form. And Adam is the first one to choose to go in as himself. And I was like, that is such an Adam thing to do, because the classic He-Man is a humble, respectable hero that did not enjoy or revel in fighting. The Filmation, the classic He-Man, was about peace and protecting his friends, and wanted to get to a day where he no longer had to fight. So if he was confronted with a choice, would you rather be Adam or He-Man, and you don't have to fight anymore, he would absolutely choose to stay as Adam. And I'm like, that is such an Adam thing to do. And it's like, again, in the little bit we get with Adam, he's super likable. Couldn't focus on him. Had to be unlikable bitch face over there. It's like, that's terrific. That is terrific. And, I've heard people say, it's like, well, we need to stamp out toxic masculinity. We need to stamp out toxic masculinity. It's like, okay, you are making it sound like anything even remotely masculine is toxic. You're starting with a faulty premise. And that's not true. And again, it goes back to disrespecting the original show, because if you knew He-Man the way that I did, and the way that I understood the character, you would know that He-Man is anything but toxically masculine. Yes, he's a big buff dude in a loincloth that has really strong punches and can punch through a wall, and he's as strong as Superman and all that other stuff. But there's way more underneath to the heart of the character that goes beyond all of that. And there are many examples in the classic Filmation series that highlight the true heart, heroism, bravery, and good-natured soul of He-Man.
Skytree, in fact any tree, has as much right to life as you or me or man-at-arms. We will not take a life to save a life.
What a warrior you would have made in my time.
I only fight when I must. And each time, I hope it is the last time. If kneeling and begging is what you want, there's no shame in doing so. I beg of you to help me save another's life.
Oh yeah, look at that. That's all just super toxic. Yeah, we just have to stamp that out. He-Man is so threatening and so super toxic. We can't have that anymore. We can't show that to children anymore. Get fucked. That's my response to that. Anybody that accuses He-Man of any kind of toxic masculinity, go fuck yourselves. You didn't watch the classic show, and if you did, you didn't respect it, or you wouldn't be supporting this. Because He-Man is a role model character that I think a lot of young people could look up to. Boys and girls, all encompassing. He-Man is a hero for everybody, and I think trying to imply that there's something inherently wrong with that character, I think, is just that. You are wrong. You are absolutely wrong, and I think it's shameful what you did. And in the process of getting rid of He-Man, you also ruined Teela, another great character, because you had to push your agenda. And it's absolutely shameful what was done. Absolutely, completely shameful. And the greatest insult of all came at the very end. And again, Adam comes back from the afterlife. They get the sword together. Everything's great. And at this point, Robato's been killed. Orko's been killed, which in a totally manipulative thing that they did. And Kevin Smith even spoiled it right before the show aired. He was laughing about it. He's like, yeah, we killed Orko. You all hate Orko. And by the way, speaking of Orko, this is another clue that this is not a true sequel to the Filmation series, because Orko is having a heart-to-heart with Evelyn, and he talks about his time on Trala and how he was actually a loser on Trala, and he was a bad magician. I was like, Wrong! I watched the classic series, and the idea of Orko was that on his home world of Trala, he was an exceptionally powerful magician, but Trala's like a topsy-turvy backwards kind of world. So on Eternia, his powers didn't work as well. But then when Adam went to Trala, he couldn't transform into He-Man without saying by the power of Grayskull backwards, because on Trala, everything is backwards. So Orko, who was called Orko the Great in his home world, was actually an exceptionally powerful magician in Trala. So them retconning that and basically saying that he was a loser even on Trala, it's like, that's not true. This isn't a sequel to the Filmation series. They can say it is, but it's not. And that's that was one of the biggest indicators for me right there, because you're not following the continuity of the classic show. And but anyway, so Orko dies, Roboto dies, but they get the sword back, and Adam comes back from the afterlife, which creates a whole other mess of problems. Like, well, wait, does Orko get to go to the He-Man heaven? Because Mossman was in the He-Man heaven, so does Orko get to go to the He-Man heaven? How does this work exactly? I don't know how any of this works. It's confusing. But anyway, Adam gets to go back. He's about to transform into He-Man and set everything right, and then Skeletor appears the fuck out of nowhere, stabs Adam, takes the sword, and gains the powers of Grayskull, which I had so many problems with this. First of all, you took one of my childhood heroes, and you killed him twice in the span of 5 episodes, which is overkill and insulting. And and then you wonder why people are mad. And Skeletor gaining the powers of Castle Grayskull is something that I would have loved to have seen back in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. I would have loved to have seen this in any other incarnation of Masters of the Universe. But you all made the oh-so-brilliant decision of removing He-Man and Skeletor from the bulk of the story, so this moment didn't have the same impact because they've been gone for most of it. If this needed to be one of two things. All right, so if you wanted to do the Death of I keep comparing it to Death of Superman, but it's like that. If you wanted to remove He-Man and Skeletor from the story, then tell that story. And theoretically make Teela way more likable than she is in this. And if you wanted to have this big moment in the cliffhanger where Skeletor gains the powers of Castle Grayskull, okay, then the show needs to be about the He-Man-Skeletor rivalry so that moment carries some kind of weight. Because the way you did it, He-Man died twice, and that is awful in a terrible way because you've already nerfed him beyond repair. So even if you bring him back in part 2 of this show, you've destroyed the goodwill, and most of the people are not going to come back. I'm probably not, because I can't watch any more of this. I straight up can't watch any more of this. So disappointing, so wrong, so awful. You even ruined something that I've wanted to see since I was a kid, Skeletor gaining the powers of Grayskull. That's something I would have shit my pants over as a youngin', and you ruin that by removing Skeletor from most of the story. It's a mess. And again, that moment only carries weight if you're a lifelong Masters of the Universe fan. New people coming into this are not going to know what the hell is going on. They're not going to know why that's a big deal or why that's a big moment. The whole thing's just a gigantic waste. The whole thing is a gigantic waste. And of course they kill Adam right after he has a heartfelt reunion with Cringer, which was another moment that endeared me to Adam. And I'm just sitting there like, the show should have been about him, the show should have been about him, the show should have been about him. It's ridiculous. And I was having a talk with my sister about this because she watched clips. She didn't watch the whole thing. And her first comment was why does the He-Man transformation look like Sailor Moon? Which a lot of people have made that comment. And I was like, I don't know. Because Sailor Moon was my sister's show. And she was texting me about it. She's like, why is my show being referenced on your show? And I'm like, I don't know. What's going on? Why? But my sister and I, we kind of went down the list. It's like, could you imagine like any other reboot where they did something like this? And I was like, okay, Kathleen, I'm going to present you with an idea. Could you imagine if Sailor Moon, because that was her big show, and my knowledge of Sailor Moon is rudimentary at best. If you put the Sailor Scouts in front of me, I could tell you which one is which. At least of the original group, I know Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, and Venus. Outside of that, I couldn't tell you who's who. But, because I know they added more. It was like Thundercats. I always say, like, Sailor Moon was my sister's Thundercats, basically, is what it was. And, like, the new Sailor Scouts, they were like Bengali, Pumaira, and Linkso. Okay, I get it. But, gotta expand the team. But, I can tell you who the Sailor Scouts are. I know who Tuxedo Mask is. And I'm aware of, like, the transformation sequences. That's about the level of knowledge that I have of Sailor Moon. Oh, and they have talking cats. I know they have talking cats, so there's that. But my knowledge is very rudimentary. But I proposed this theoretical to my sister. I was like, okay, could you imagine if I was put in charge of a Sailor Moon reboot? And my decision was to kill Sailor Moon in the first episode and then put Tuxedo Mask in charge. And her comment was, Patrick, if you did that, I would throw something at your head. And I was like, yeah, because apparently Tuxedo Mask is like, I asked her, it's like, all right, well, how do fans feel about Tuxedo Mask? And it's like, the show would be less if he wasn't there, but he's nobody's favorite character. It's this weird position that he fills. It's like somebody's got to be in that role, but he's not everybody's favorite. And at least that's what she said to me. And I was like, well, how would you feel if I put him in charge of the show? She would be like, I would not be happy, like, at all. And I was also thinking about, like, what if I did, well, Sarah Michelle Gellar is the voice of Teela in this new show, or not Teela, or whatever the hell that was. Which, by the way, the design is also, like, hilariously mannish and masculine, to the point of, like, that's just a dude, isn't it? Like, you know what I mean? And then they made Prince Adam, like, comically wimpy looking. I know that the classic show, Prince Adam was basically just a palette swap for He-Man because they wanted to save money. So they look kind of identical to each other. But Adam could fight. In most incarnations of He-Man, Adam could fight. And they made him deliberately like this scrawny wimp that looks like, a strong breeze. I could knock him off his feet. But anyway, could you imagine if I was put in charge of a reboot of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I said, we're going to kill Buffy in the first episode, and then we're going to put Xander in charge. That would never fly, and I would be run out of town. Justifiably so, because that would be ridiculous. And it's almost an unfair comparison, because I like Teela way more than I like Xander, and way more than my sister likes Tuxedo Mask. So it's almost not an equal comparison, but what they ended up doing to Teela didn't work either. So it was like, all right, so you just made this horrible character that's Teelo. She's Teela in name only. And you made a garbage story out of it. And that made me just wish the entire time, I wish He-Man was here. I would love to have He-Man back. Can I have He-Man back? And then you gave me He-Man back, and then you killed him immediately afterwards. It's like, fuck you. Like, seriously, fuck you. And the entire thing is just a poorly written mess. And it breaks my heart because, again, the artwork in this show overall is pretty good. And they went painstakingly captured the look of the classic toys in the toy line. And to see that in animation was really cool to see. And it just absolutely breaks my heart that clearly a lot of work went into this, both from the voice cast and the animation side of things. And it all faults with the writing. It's all about the writing. That's where everything faltered. That's where everything falls apart. And it's a shame. It really is a shame, because this was an opportunity to do something really, really cool and introduce He-Man and the Masters of the Universe to a whole new generation, and they didn't do that. It's a shame. And I've heard some people say with the whole, like, killing He-Man and Skeletor thing, is like, that would have carried more weight if this was, like, season 3 of a new show. And I'm like, yeah, it probably would have. But again, that's also part of the whole, like, it relies so heavily on your knowledge and already being a Masters of the Universe fan. And then it just constantly slaps you in the face the entire time for being a fan. So it's like, it's like Thundercats Roar, better looking Thundercats Roar. But it's like, I don't know who this is for. Like, who is this even for? Because Thundercats Roar made the same mistake with a much worse art style, but it made the exact same mistake where it's like, it references and borrows from the original show so heavily, but then it tells you to basically go fuck yourself if you're a fan. I don't get it. I don't understand it. I don't know who that's designed to appeal to, but it's what we're living with right now. So hey, fuck it. What do I know? So yeah, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, Masters of the Universe Revelations. Awful. Absolutely awful. And the major ball dropped. Disappointment all around. I think Kevin Smith's meltdowns on Twitter, and him saying that we're a bunch of fake fans and trolls and all of that other stuff. It's like, dude, Kevin, I was a fan of your work, man, back in the 90s. Like Clerks, Mallrats, Dogma I like because I'm Catholic, so naturally I love Dogma. Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. I read some of your Clerks comic books, which I thought were good. I like Clerks 2. I've defended Clerks 2 to people. I am not out to get you. I'm not. I'm also fully aware you have not made anything good since Clerks 2, and this is an absolute fiasco. And to call me a troll or a fake fan is completely unwarranted. I am anything but, and I liked and respected you for years, and you have definitely soured on me in the last 2 days or so. Because A, you lied, and B, now you're mad at me for calling you out on the fact that you lied. Fuck you, Kevin. That's my response. That is my response to that. I saw you speak live at a convention once, too. And I've got to listen to you call me a troll and a fake fan. It's like, oh, that's fantastic. Fan-fucking-tastic. But anyway, so that was that. That's Masters of the Universe. The other major disappointment, dropped on the exact same day as Masters of the Universe Revelations, was the Snake Eyes movie. Snake Eyes Origins G.I. Joe, or I forget the actual title. It's like Snake Eyes G.I. Joe Origins or something like that. But a new G.I. Joe movie has been released to very little fanfare. I heard very few people talking about this movie, which is never a good sign. That means it's bad and they're just trying to sneak it into theaters and get it in and out as quickly as possible and hopefully avoid a shitstorm. I did not go see Snake Eyes, so this is not a review. I didn't go see it. I have absolutely no desire to see it because I already know it's bad. How do I know it's bad? How do I know that they already missed a mark? Well, let me tell you about Snake Eyes. Let me explain something about Snake Eyes and my fandom for G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe, I loved the classic animated series when I was a kid. But something about G.I. Joe that I liked even more, I also had the toys. I had some of the toys. But really, my fandom of G.I. Joe comes more from the comic books by Larry Hama, the Marvel Comics series, which I will go as far to say this, probably my favorite comic book series of all time is the classic G.I. Joe comics. And on the Joe team, typically I prefer the Cobra characters, like I have more of a connection to Cobra Commander and Destro and the Baroness and those characters. But the G.I. Joe that I connected with the most, my favorite member of the Joe team, one of my favorite comic book superheroes of all time, is Snake Eyes, the best and most famous member of G.I. Joe. Why is he the best character? Because he's a ninja, which is the most 80s. I mean, if it's a ninja, you know it's 80s. It's drenched in 80s if it's a ninja. But he's a ninja that's working for a military organization, which is just fucking awesome. But he's also, he wears a mask and he never talks. And the mystery built around him is so good, and it's great to watch that unfold throughout the original comic series. And the animated show didn't really delve into his backstory all that much, and they kind of phased him out as the show progressed. But in the little bit we do get with Snake Eyes, a personality comes through. He's very brave. He's very independent. He loves his teammates, and he will do anything for them, even to defy orders. That personality comes across in both the animated series and the comic books, more so in the comic books. The fact that they were able to take a character who's so limited, no facial expressions, no real identity, and no dialogue, he doesn't talk, and get that much of a personality and build that much of a connection with the audience, and for him to become the most famous G.I. Joe, it says a lot for how well he was written and presented, particularly by Larry Hama in the comic books. And he's also one of the best examples of how limitations can actually bolster creativity. I've praised the show Primal. One of my favorite animated shows. Is probably my favorite original programming that's ever been aired on Cartoon Network or Adult Swim or whatever, on the entire channel. It's my favorite thing they've ever done. And it's a show about a caveman and a dinosaur that survive in a savage prehistoric world with dinosaurs and monsters. And it's great because the caveman and the dinosaur do not talk. And that's what makes it great. Because their personalities come out through the visuals and the way they interact with each other and the world around them. And that, to me, I love creativity. When you limit yourself, it forces you to be creative. And I think Primal is a great example of that. And I think Snake Eyes is a wonderful example of that. Probably the best example of that comes from the most famous issue of G.I. Joe's comics run, Silent Interlude, which is a comic that is entirely visual. There is no dialogue, and it's just Snake Eyes on a rescue mission, and it's great. And they get so much personality and character out of Snake Eyes, and he doesn't talk. And the best part about that is that when the comic series decides to delve into his backstory a little bit more, take the mask off, which is very rare, but they did it. And when he does talk, which as far as I can remember, he only talked twice. Once was the last issue where he was responding to a letter, and he was writing a letter back to someone, and that's the last issue, and it's wonderful. It's a great last issue, and a great ending to the series. And a moment where Scarlet is on her deathbed, basically, or might be on her deathbed. It's not looking good for her. And because Snake Eyes loves her, he whispers her name. That is beautiful. And it's a moment that is beautifully earned, because up until that point in the comics, Snake Eyes had never uttered a word. And that's what makes that moment so impactful. Him just saying a name carries a lot of weight because Snake Eyes doesn't talk. And it's like those weird limitation things, and it makes those big impactful moments feel like they're more earned. The Mandalorian, as much as I really like that show, and I really, really enjoyed that show, I think it's the best Star Wars thing to come out since the classic trilogy. When you get to that moment at the end of season 2 where the Mandalorian takes his mask off and he shows it to Grogu to say goodbye to him, there's a part of me that wishes, man, this is a great moment, but how great would it have been if we had never seen the Mandalorian take the mask off until we get to share that moment with Grogu? It would have been great to share in that moment with Grogu. And I think it would have made it even more impactful if they'd held back on it. But he took the mask off a couple of times before then, so it maybe undercut that moment a little bit. But I'm a big fan of that type of stuff. Hold back, build some mystery into somebody, and then when you do the payoff, it carries so much more weight. Even in personality traits, you watch Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, and you get to the point where she's bitten into the poison apple and she's thought to be dead, and the Seven Dwarves are all crying over her. It's not Dopey's reaction that hurts the most. It's not Doc's reaction that hurts the most. It's Grumpy's, because Grumpy is the grump. And to see him break down, that carries a lot more impact. So, I'm a big fan of limiting yourself, holding back, and earning those big moments through those limitations. So with all that said, what is the reason why I do not want to see the Snake Eyes movie?
I'm not a murderer.
Oh, yeah, it's that. It's that right there. He talks and I see his face. You already fucked it up. You've demonstrated in your own advertising that you do not understand the Snake Eyes character on a fundamental level, and you do not understand the appeal of that character at all. And it's almost like I can almost see the meeting that involved creating this movie, where it's we want to make a Snake Eyes movie because Snake Eyes is the most popular G.I. Joe. By far. It's not Duke, it's not Flint, it's not Lady J, it's not Scarlet, it's not Shipwreck, it's not Beachhead, it's not General Hawk, it's not any of those guys. It's not even Sergeant Slaughter, who I love, by the way, in G.I. Joe. It's Snake Eyes. He is the most popular Joe by a country mile. So they wanted to make a Snake Eyes movie, but audiences are too stupid. They're not going to understand a movie where somebody's masked the whole time and he's not talking. They're not going to be able to connect with the character. So they took the mask off and they have him talk the whole time, which completely. And I didn't see the movie, but I talked to people that did, and they pretty much told me it's he doesn't become the Snake Eyes that you love from the comics. He's just a boring generic action hero that puts on the Snake Eyes suit, but he doesn't have any of what you would expect to see out of a Snake Eyes origin even. And yeah, I heard Samara Weaving's in this, which depressed me because I loved her in Ready or Not. I thought she was great in that, but apparently she plays Scarlet in this. I'm like, oh no, why are you in this? No, I like you. Don't be in bad projects. I hate it when actors I like are in bad projects, but yeah, it's just they demonstrated that they do not understand the Snake Eyes character, but it feels like they wanted to make the movie because Snake Eyes is the most recognizable character in G.I. Joe, at least from the G.I. Joe team perspective. But they wanted to dumb it down to make sure that audiences could follow it because they underestimated the audience. And I'm sitting there like, okay, you could have done Quick Kick. You could have done Spirit. You could have done Yeah, I mean, there was a whole Ninja Force worth of characters. You could have done any of them. You could have done Jinx. That would have gotten you the female woke points, because Jinx is a female character. But no, we can't do that because Snake Eyes is the most famous character, but we have to do him wrong because we think audiences are stupid. And it's like, then why even make the fucking movie? But then again, I mean, I think back to Rise of Cobra, and I'm sitting there in the theater watching this. I'm like, why did Cobra Commander and Destro have backstories? They are the characters that should not have backstories, because the whole appeal of them is that we know nothing about them and they're super mysterious, and they should be already established. And giving them backstories is just a huge mistake. I don't subscribe to the George Lucas school of everything needs to be explained. It's like, no, I don't need to see Darth Vader as a 9-year-old. I was fine with what we had in the classic trilogy. I didn't need more than that. Sorry. That's kind of how I feel. But, so the Snake Eyes movie, didn't want to see it. I'm not going to see it. I talked to people that did see it, and they said it's basically just a generic action movie that's instantly forgettable, which I guess is less insulting than Masters of the Universe, but it's not Snake Eyes. That's not Snake Eyes. I shouldn't know what Snake Eyes looks like in his first movie outing, but it is what it is. So that's another one that they fucked up. But I also saw Space Jam 2 earlier today. That was an interesting Space Jam: A New Legacy. And let me start off this review by saying that I do not have a lot of love for the original Space Jam. It's not one of my favorite movies. I know it's a childhood favorite for a lot of people. I don't hate it, but I'm also not like a huge fan of it. But the original Space Jam has 3 things going for it. One, it was capitalizing on the popularity of both the Michael Jordan Bugs Bunny shoe commercials, which were big at the time, and the fact that the NBA and Michael Jordan were fucking huge. So it was capitalizing on things that were popular at the time. The album is lit as fuck. I have literally bought that album 3 times. I'm not even kidding, because I bought the CD, lost it, bought it again, and in the years since, I bought it on digital and have it downloaded on my workout playlist, because that thing is that shit is just unreal and how good it is. I Believe I Can Fly, the Space Jam theme, the Monstars theme, Fly Like an Eagle. That is a kick-ass album. The worst part of the album is the Bugs Bunny rap. That's the worst thing on it, and that wasn't even in the movie. But, the album's fucking great, and the cameos from the NBA players were the funniest scenes in the movie. That was what it had going for it. Okay, so, and I guess it had a little bit of charm for what it was. Again, I don't hate the movie, but I'm not overly in love with it either. Space Jam 2... it has all the negatives of the original Space Jam, of basically just being one big commercial, which is all the original Space Jam really was. It's just one gigantic commercial. Only this sequel cranks it up to 10, and it has very little of the positives. The music is nowhere near as memorable. I don't remember any of the songs that were in the movie, except for the classic tunes that they use, like the Batman theme and things like that, which that's a whole other thing that I'll get into in a minute. But, and it doesn't have any meaningful cameos from anybody that are funny or worthwhile. Because again, go back and watch the original Space Jam. The whole montage with the NBA players dealing with losing their talents. It's the funniest damn scene in the whole movie. Charles Barkley, low key, the funniest thing in that movie. I'll never go out with Madonna again. Muggsy Bogues talking to the psychiatrist. What you saying? You saying that I'm trying to disrespect my mama? I didn't say that, Muggsy. You did. But I love my mama. See, the fucking gold. That whole scene's fucking gold. The NBA players, low-key, the funniest thing in that movie. In a movie that includes the Looney Tunes and Bill Murray, the NBA players were the funniest thing in it. But none of that's in here. So it doesn't have the music, doesn't have the NBA players, or anybody that's really that funny. And it's not capitalizing on anything that big, because the NBA is nowhere near as big now as it was back then. And there aren't any commercials or anything that are popular that they're trying to capitalize on. So what they have instead is Warner Brothers sucking their own dick and showing off, hey, look at all this cool shit that we own. We own DC. We own The Matrix. We own Austin Powers. I'm like, do people care about those things 20 years later? Whatever, we own them. We own Game of Thrones. I think people stopped caring about Game of Thrones after season 8 was so bad. We own King Kong. I was like, all right, I like King Kong. We own Casablanca. I'm like, all right, I like Casablanca. It's an old movie. I don't think anybody younger than me has ever watched it, but sure, I like Casablanca. But It's a bunch of like Warner sucking their own dick to show off. Look at all the cool shit we got, Harry Potter, motherfucker, and all this other stuff. And it's basically like, because I remember watching Wreck-It Ralph 2 and just being annoyed at how much Disney was just sucking their own dick. It's like, look, we own Star Wars, we own the Muppets, and I'm like, please stop showing off that you own Star Wars and the Muppets, because that depresses me in ways that I can't properly express here. Because I've seen what you've done to Star Wars and the Muppets, and it is absolutely depressing. Please stop reminding me that you own them. And a bunch of shit like that, and it just became annoying, and it felt like Disney was just jerking themselves off. And this felt like Warner Brothers jerking themselves off to that degree times 10, and it was just ridiculous. It's like, oh hey, we got Rick and Morty, motherfuckers! And it was just every few minutes they were referencing something. I saw, if you look in the crowd at the basketball game, they have a bunch of Hanna-Barbera characters there, and I was like, oh, hey, look, it's the Herculoids. I loved that cartoon as a kid, the Herculoids. That low-key, one of my favorite Hanna-Barbera cartoons was the Herculoids. I'm like, oh, look at that, it's the Herculoids. That's interesting. So there's a lot of that going on. It's like, hey, you know this, you know that, you know this, you know that. It's pretty cool that we own it all, isn't it? And so it feels like Warner Brothers sucking their own dick, while also putting LeBron James on a gigantic godlike pedestal that he is like the king almighty. And it's like, dude, I thought they sucked Jordan's dick in the original Space Jam. This is that times a million, where it's like you'd think that James or LeBron James is like a god, like among mere mortals. In this movie, they really go the long way. Although they do take some jabs at him, like Bugs Bunny says at one point. It's like, hey, what's up, Doc? You looking for another team to join? Or something like that. But, so they take their jabs too. But it's, it really did feel like they were overdoing it with the LeBron James love. And by the way, the original Space Jam made a smart, I cannot believe I'm praising the original Space Jam here. But, they were very smart to not have Michael Jordan do the heavy lifting as far as acting goes. He was pretty much just be Michael, and then just be the straight man to the Looney Tunes, and just let them carry the load. And that's pretty much all he had to do. LeBron, they actually try to have him act and be funny, and it's like, no. There are scenes where he tries to be emotional, and scenes where he tries to be funny, and I'm just sitting there like, don't do that. Don't do that. This is embarrassing. This is really bad. And the movie overall is bad. It is bad, but I will say, and this is kind of the saving grace of the movie, the Looney Tunes themselves provide enough moments to where I was not completely miserable. So it's like they got the personalities of the Looney Tunes mostly intact, and there are a few jokes that work with them. And it's fun to see the Looney Tunes running around being themselves. Like there's a point where, again, Warner's sucking their own dick, and all the Looney Tunes, for some reason, is sent to all these different worlds, and the Warner, and the villain's Don Cheadle playing an algorithm, and it's stupid, and the plot makes no sense. But, all the Looney Tunes have gone to the different areas of the Warner Brothers servers, or different worlds, or whatever, and Daffy and Porky go to the DC world. They try to concoct a plan to join the Justice League, and I'm like, that's so Daffy and Porky. That's such a Daffy thing to do. And there's things like that where it's like, okay, it feels like they're at least being true to the Looney Tunes. I feel like I'm watching the Looney Tunes. And there's a few jokes that work. There's a joke with Michael Jordan, quote unquote. There's a joke with Michael Jordan that actually really, really was funny. And I'm like, okay, that was pretty funny. And so the Looney Tunes carry the load here and keep me from being completely miserable while watching this. So, yes, it's a bad movie. Yes, it's a soulless commercial that does nothing but shill Warner Brothers, all of the things they own, and LeBron James. But the Looney Tunes themselves keep it from being a complete fiasco. So it's like, all right, it's bad, but it's not the worst thing I've seen this weekend, so I'll give it a pass in that regard. It was almost a palate cleanser after watching Masters of the Universe Revelations, which is the saddest thing I've ever said in my life. It's nowhere near as good as the first Space Jam, which is another sentence I never thought I would ever say. But I at least enjoyed... You know what it didn't do? It didn't fuck over the characters I liked. And that's the difference between that and Masters of the Universe Revelations. Like, you know what? The Looney Tunes were kind of done justice here, and they feel true to themselves. Masters, completely fucked that over. And we're getting to a point now where there have been so many bad reboots of things that I enjoyed watching as a kid, and properties that I've followed for most of my life. Ninja Turtles, Transformers, G.I. Joe, Thundercats, He-Man, Batman, various other superhero properties and things like that. And most of them turn out awful. Now, granted, there are good ones, like the DuckTales reboot that recently concluded, but it feels like the good ones are few and far between, and the DuckTales reboot was an exception, not the rule. And I'm getting to a point now where if something is based on a pre-existing IP, I should just avoid it like the plague, because Jesus Christ almighty, I just can't handle watching everything that I loved as a kid just get completely destroyed. I just can't handle it anymore. It's becoming like so disheartening and demoralizing to watch. It's so bad. And I'm thinking about, all right, which ones that I like have not been destroyed? Ghostbusters has been dragged through the mud. Terminator, Alien, Predator, RoboCop, which got a bad remake that nobody remembers. It's funny. I was like, yeah, RoboCop got a remake a few years ago. I'm like, holy shit, that did happen. I'm like, yeah, it did. Back to the Future has thankfully never been remade. I hope that never happens. The Universal monsters, they've been destroyed to where it's like anytime I see Dracula or Frankenstein pop up in anything, I'm like, please don't, please don't, please don't. No, stop it. And it's just this constant cycle of abuse. Star Wars has been completely destroyed. Star Trek has been completely destroyed. It's like this giant massacre that's happening. And I'm thinking, it's like, all right, what are the only ones that haven't been completely destroyed? And I'm like, okay, DuckTales, which is the reboot's over. So it's not like we're getting any more new material out of that. The Rocky Creed movies, which I kind of want them to stop making those. You can stop now, because I like Creed 2, I really enjoyed. Please stop. Please stop while you're ahead, please. And this is a weird one. Godzilla. And this is even acknowledging that some of the Godzilla projects have kind of been disappointing, like the anime trilogy and Godzilla Singular Point, which was not as good as it could have been. But very much like what I said about Space Jam 2, you know what those disappointing Godzilla projects didn't do? They didn't completely fuck over Godzilla's character to the point that it made me sad that I was a Godzilla fan. So it's like, you know what? I'll put up with something less than stellar. I will put up with something less than stellar as long as it doesn't completely fuck over the brand, which is what Masters of the Universe Revelations and the Snake Eyes thing feel like they are. They're either fucking over the brand or they're completely misrepresenting it. I will chalk up Revelations almost feels like it was done on purpose. Like, just done on purpose to piss people off. And Snake Eyes feels like a bad committee decision, just a bunch of suits that don't get it, that just put something out there because they thought it had some brand recognition. But in any case, it's really bad. And the fact that, and you look back to Masters of the Universe Revelation, I think the fact that the critic score is what it is and the audience score is what it is, it shows that there's a huge disconnect between, like, the entertainment world bubble and what real people actually want to see and real fans actually want to see. And it's something that's continued on and on and on and on, and it's becoming more and more of a common thing. And it's a shame, it's disappointing, and it's absolutely, as Daffy Duck would say, it's despicable. And it's like, how sad is it that, like, Space Jam 2, which isn't even good, is probably, like, oh my god, that's so depressing. It's the least objectionable thing of the three things that I just covered. It's, oh my god! Oh! God damn! Holy shit! And we got the final part of the Netflix Transformers dropping next week, which the biggest problem of, like, the Transformers show on Netflix is that it's boring. Like, it doesn't push any kind of an agenda. It's not trying to deconstruct anything. It's just boring. And it's like, oh god, do I want to watch that? But they're adding the Beast Wars characters to it, so that'll liven things up, hopefully. We'll see. I'm gonna watch it, because it's like, look, it's boring, but it hasn't pissed me off, so I'll give it that. But, and I guess I'll just see how it ends. And it's like, the fact that it's including Beast Wars characters intrigues me. So it's like, we'll see how that goes. But, I mean, it's been like watching all my favorite properties just get run through a buzzsaw watching all of this go down. And it is a crying shame. And this one in particular, Masters of the Universe, is the one I'm going to keep harping on. But it's like, that one, they had an opportunity. They had the right animation. It's like Star Wars all over again. It really is, because you look at the sequel Star Wars trilogy, they had the original cast back together. They had generally good casting for the new characters, generally, for the most part, good casting for the new characters. And they had excitement and, all the money in the world to bring Star Wars back. They had people excited, and then you see how the sequel trilogy turned out, and it's like, oh no. And I'm looking at this new He-Man. You had the animation studio. You had the voice cast. You didn't have the writing, and it sank absolutely everything, and it's a crying shame. It absolutely is a crying shame. But in any case, so now that I'm over an hour into my ranting and raving, let's go into wrestling and some major developments that are going on. Mainly, a couple of potentially big signees for AEW and a couple of big returns for WWE. Let me start with AEW because I think those are the bigger headlines. But apparently, it's all but confirmed that CM Punk and Bryan Danielson, are heading to All Elite Wrestling. Now, that is absolutely huge. You take a guy who was one of the most over guys in WWE, one of the most sympathetic baby faces in WWE in Daniel Bryan, and you take a guy like CM Punk, who held the WWE title for over 500 days, and left the company the way that he did, with the shitstorm that happened surrounding that with the podcast and the lawsuit and all that other stuff. There are potentially interesting elements at play here, and I'll be very interested to see, assuming that all the reports are true and that Punk and Danielson are going to show up. I'll be very interested to see what they do with them. The big question mark for me is on CM Punk. I think Bryan is going to slip into things fairly naturally as a worker. And I think at this point in his career, he just wants to work with the guys that he wants to work with, like the Kenny Omegas and the Young Bucks and those type of guys. I think he would go there because he would enjoy working with those guys. And I think it would be potentially interesting to see him work with some of those guys. But I think in Punk's case, there's a lot more, at least a short-term intrigue. I mean, I would say in his debut, I would just give him a live mic and just let him talk and just see what's going to come out of his mouth. I think you can get a lot out of just that. The issues with Punk is that I do think his brand has been damaged both by the ill-advised MMA run, because it's like, dude, you're scrawny as fuck. I'm bigger than you. And you thought in your mid-30s, when you've been beat to hell from pro wrestling, that you thought it was a good idea to jump in the octagon and start trading fists with people. I'm like, somebody needed to pull you aside and go like, dude, this is a really bad idea. This is a really, really bad idea. And, you're not Jack Swagger. You're not Brock Lesnar. You're not Bobby Lashley. You're not a guy who can naturally transition into the world of MMA. You don't have the background. You're not Kurt Angle could have done it. If he hadn't gone into pro wrestling and gone into UFC instead, I bet Kurt Angle could have done pretty well at it. But Punk made that decision. I think the humiliation he suffered on that kind of hurt his brand a little bit. And then there's also the fact that his first appearance on a wrestling program after storming out of WWE the way he did was on a WWE magazine show, which really cut into his rebel image significantly. And he can say, it's like, oh, I worked for Fox. I didn't work for WWE. And I'm like, all right, you can say that, but come on. Like, you appeared on WWE programming. And the perception is everything. And it's like, how much of a rebel are you really? And he didn't wrestle and the show got canceled. So it's like, that makes it look even worse. But even with all that said, I think there's potential intrigue to be mined with CM Punk. And at the very least, you're getting a good talker, which is a very good... That's always been CM Punk's strongest suit. Because if you look at Punk, when he was in the Indies, he was one of the guys that were around at that time. He was actually one of the least athletic in the things that he could do. But he got more over than all of them. What set him apart? He could talk. That's what set him apart from all the other indie guys that were around. And there's a reason why CM Punk went on to be a major star, and why guys like Matt Bentley and Amazing Red and Paul London didn't really. I mean, I like Paul London. I'm not gonna lie, but there's a reason the disparity in success level between Punk and those guys. The reason why is because Punk can talk, and he has a personality that can draw people in. And I think there's some gold to be mined there. I just don't know if it's as big as it could have been had he not done the MMA UFC thing, and had he not gone back to WWE the way that he did for a C-tier magazine show that nobody watched. And another thing about Punk, he's a bit of a prick. CM Punk is probably my favorite wrestler of all time that I never want to meet in person because he strikes me as kind of a prick. I don't know if you were going to enjoy dealing with that on a day-to-day basis, but we'll see how all of that goes. Hopefully he's buried the hatchet with Colt Cabana, because that could create an awkward situation. I don't know. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see how all that plays out. So I guess we'll know more after Dynamite this week. I'm definitely tuning in just to see what the hell happens. They might just make the announcement that CM Punk is coming and then build up to his eventual debut. They might do something like that. I don't know. We shall see. It'll all be very interesting. Some people have criticized AEW for picking up too many ex-WWE guys, and yeah, but at the same time, it's like they're still pushing Darby, they're still pushing MJF. There's Lance Archer got a win over Jon Moxley in the main event last week, which kind of shocked me. I was like, whoa, Archer, who's been kind of like struggling lately to get a big win, and he beats one of the most unbeatable guys in the company. It's like, whoa, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Now he's going to have a match with Haku's kid, who's like 9 feet tall. I'm like, Jesus, that guy's big. Holy shit. But yeah, they're still pushing their homegrown guys. I think it's got to be a balance. You can't just have all new guys that the audience is completely unfamiliar with. But you can't just rely on guys like Christian Cage and Matt Hardy, because then it just looks like WCW old folks home wrestling, and you don't want that. So it's got to be a balancing act. And but again, we'll see how it all plays out. I think Danielson and Punk are two guys that are worthy pickups. We'll see how they do, assuming the reports are true and that they actually do show up on AEW programming. But WWE, not to be outdone, they had a couple of returns themselves. I watched, this is a shocking statement, I watched Raw this week because it was the first time that they had an audience. SmackDown was the first show after leaving the Thunderdome, and it's the first show with a crowd since the pandemic started, and they held the Money in the Bank pay-per-view that Sunday. I didn't watch either of those shows because I was busy that weekend, but I did watch Raw on Monday night, out of curiosity to see what WWE would look like with a live crowd again. And it looked like a WWE show for the most part. It's overly long. I was bored about halfway through, and the show was too long because it's Raw and it's got to be 3 hours. And I was like, okay. And then, when did Nikki Cross adopt a superhero gig? This tells you how out of touch I am with WWE, because I didn't know that Nikki Cross was a superhero now. I'm like, when did that happen? Shit. And when did Charlotte Flair get all that plastic surgery? Because she looks like a completely different person now. Holy God. Yeah, the show was not very enjoyable, but the two major things I want to talk about from it. John Cena made his return. He's going to be facing Roman Reigns, which I think is a big match for them to do, and it's a big win, assuming Roman's going to win. I would think that Roman would win. But listening to Cena cut that promo, I was like, I have not missed you at all. Just not at all. And the fact that Cena looks old now, and in that outfit, it looks even worse. And I'm just like, oh my God, I haven't missed you one fucking bit. Not one bit. And this is just so many bad memories, both since doing videos on this channel and since Cena became a big star in 2005. I'm like, I didn't miss you one bit, and I'm not happy that you're back. But he's going to be facing Roman Reigns, and hope to God that there's another sentence I never expected to say in my lifetime. I hope to God that Roman Reigns goes over. And then at the other point in the show, we got the return of Keith Lee, who had been gone for months, and he faced Bobby Lashley, but Bobby Lashley won, retained the title and everything. But then he was confronted by Goldberg, the returning Goldberg, and now it's going to be Lashley versus Goldberg for the Raw title. And I'm like, and here's the thing. I am a Goldberg fan. I was a huge fan of him in the Monday Night Wars period. I was a huge mark for Goldberg because I completely bought into the act because it was completely believable. And I thought Goldberg himself carried a lot of believability with him. And the guys he worked with knew how to mask and the way he was booked masked a lot of his limitations. But it was a one-trick pony, but it was a trick that I really, really liked. And I totally believed in and bought into. And when he had that return program with Lesnar, I thought that went about as well as it possibly could. It could not have gone any better. They had that awesome match at WrestleMania where I've said it before, it's the best WrestleMania match of the 30s. I enjoyed the holy hell out of that thing. And when that match happened and Goldberg took the loss, and that's, again, one of those matches, I've said this before, it's one of those matches I wish there had been a camera on me while I was watching it, because I was jumping up and down, I was screaming Goldberg, I reverted back into the fan I was back in 98, where I was just cheering for Goldberg like crazy. They recaptured the Goldberg magic for what should have been his final run. And when that match happened, he took the L, I was like, all right, Lesnar kicked out of the jackhammer, Goldberg took the loss, he made up for the fiasco that happened at WrestleMania 20. You should retire. This should be it. Dude, you're not going to recapture this magic again. And they've brought him back so many times that it's been diminishing returns, because I know it's just going to be a finisher fest 2-minute match. That's all it's going to be. Because they've spammed it too much. And it's like, I know exactly what it's going to be. It's going to be a finisher fest 2-minute match. And Goldberg's lost to Braun Strowman. He lost to Drew McIntyre. And I have no reason to believe that he's going to beat Bobby Lashley. And Lashley's going to beat him in 2 minutes. And it's like, it carries no weight anymore because I've seen it before. And it's over. Like, the mystique is gone. The magic is gone. And once you've spoiled that, there's no use in Bill Goldberg. And I hate to say that because, again, I love Goldberg. I was a huge fan of his back during the Monday Night Wars period. And I think during that program with Lesnar, they did recapture that magic, but it's over now. It's over. Goldberg needs to retire and stop spoiling it. But there was that fiasco with Undertaker at the Saudi show, and I'm like, oh my God, no, you should have retired at WrestleMania. No! They never know when to stop. They never do. That's the problem with wrestling. They never know when to quit. And it's, yeah, it is what it is. It is what it is. So I'm not overly excited about Bobby Lashley versus Goldberg. I think it's just going to be a quick win for Lashley just to give him some credit. Hopefully that's all it is. I wouldn't think that Goldberg would beat him. But and I will say this, coming out of Raw, and it kind of confirmed my suspicions based on the little bit of WWE that I have followed. Roman Reigns and Bobby Lashley are the two best things in WWE right now by far, and they are the perfect choices to be the champions based on their other options, because they're not part-time old-timers, they're not that, and they're believable heels that can beat the ever-living shit out of people. And it's Wrestling 101, but it's like, look, of all the things I can knock WWE for right now, like how they're burying NXT now, it's and you know, all the reports that like Vince is burying NXT because he's pissed off that they lost the Wednesday Night Wars to AEW. Might be true. I don't know. I don't know if it's a good enough excuse for Karrion Kross to get jobbed out to Jeff Hardy mercilessly on Raw for no reason, to the benefit of no one. I mean, that didn't do anybody any favors, except make the NXT champion look like a bitch. But it's and I haven't watched NXT either, so I don't even know what's going on over there. But yeah, when you look at the current landscape of the WWE, I know a lot of people liked Drew as champion. I think he's kind of bland. It's like, look, he's just he's good worker guy. That's what he is. That's all he is. I don't dislike Drew, but I'm not in love with him either. He's just a guy that held the belt because they didn't know what else to do. And he has that kind of air to him. Kind of like a Bob Backlund, except Bob Backlund was a much better worker, like technical worker than Drew ever was. But it's I never was in love with Drew McIntyre at any point in his career, whether he was in TNA or WWE. He's just always like a good worker guy, on his best days. And him as champion just didn't excite me or do anything for me. And he also suffered from the fact that he was the main champion during the early days of the pandemic, which didn't do him any favors at all. But I look at someone like Bobby Lashley, who has MVP as a mouthpiece, which is the most I've ever enjoyed MVP because I never liked him as a worker all that much. But it's like, as a voice, mouthpiece for the heel champion, he's pretty good. He's pretty good. Lashley is a guy that could believably murder somebody, but the thing that always held him back is his voice sounds like me. It sounds like Mickey Mouse. I have a naturally high-pitched voice that's not threatening at all. And Lashley has that same problem, but you got MVP to talk for him, and it solves that problem. And Roman Reigns, he's got Heyman with him, which covers a lot of the mic work, and he's just a believable big guy that beat the shit out of people. So I think as far as heel champions go, I think Reigns and Lashley are the most believable, and I think they are the best options to carry the belts on their respective brands. So for all the faults that WWE currently has, and there are a lot of them, it is kind of cool to see two strong heel champions being built up. So I will give them that. I will absolutely give them that. Will I continue watching Raw, or will I start watching SmackDown moving forward? Probably not. But I do like Roman and Lashley as champions. Just the rest of the show is just a slog to get through, and I just can't. I did like the 6-man tag on Raw this week. It was Riddle and AJ and who else was in that? I've already forgotten who was in it, but it was like that 6-man tag was fun, but it's just it's hard to get into WWE because the fundamentals of their program just completely disconnect with me. I did watch Slammiversary. I did watch that pay-per-view. Generally thought it was okay. It had some of the hallmarks of Impact that you expect. Like, oh look, another Ultimate X match with 6 people crammed into it. You haven't done that 5,000 times. But I did pop for Thunder Rosa showing up, and I did pop for Switchblade showing up. And I'm like, that was pretty cool. And it's like, okay, are we starting to see like the beginnings of like a loose territory system where it's like NWA gets people and AEW gets people and Impact gets people, and it's like, that's kind of neat to see. If we can get a super show out of it, that would be fine with that. So that's the state of wrestling right now. Most of the stuff that's exciting me is outside of WWE, the stuff that's capturing my intrigue. And I gotta say, ever since they got back onto Wednesday nights and they've been in front of different crowds, AEW, the last few shows have been pretty damn good, I think, personally. Thank God Britt Baker went over Nyla Rose this week, because I was sitting there like, if Nyla wins this match, I swear to God. By the way, Nyla Rose is horrible. The only times I've ever enjoyed her in a match is when she's with Riho, and that's only because Riho is so tiny that the contrast makes for an interesting matchup. But any other time I've watched Nyla, it's like, she's awful. Like, she's just straight up awful. And I was just thankful that Britt retained. But generally I've enjoyed AEW the last few weeks. They've rebuilt some of the goodwill after the disastrous preempted shows that happened during the NBA playoffs. So we're past that now, and I think the shows have gotten much better as a result. So that is all I have for you now. A lot of ranting and raving. Haven't done this in a while, but it feels nice to be back to doing this, even if it is just a complaint about a cartoon that bastardized something I liked as a kid. But I will say this for Masters of the Universe. There is a second show coming to Netflix. To my understanding, it's a CGI animated show, and it's going to be one geared more towards kids. And I'm like, you know what? If they keep it a kid's show and it's He-Man having adventures, it's probably going to be better than Revelations. We'll see. I don't know. Personally, if I was put in charge of Masters of the Universe, I would do something akin to like Batman Brave and the Bold, where it's like, it's He-Man having adventures with like his core group, which is like Orko, Tila, Battle Cat, and Man-at-Arms, but then they team up with another character from the brand, like Fisto or Manny Faces or Ram Man or Clamp Champ or Extendar or Cyclone or one of those guys. And you get like a weekly guest star or something in each episode. And they get to, or Skeletor gets a new ally in some episodes. Like one episode shows off Webstor or Whiplash or Trapjaw or whatever and have some fun with that. But I would, like, if I was going to tackle Masters in the modern age, my idea would probably to just gear more towards Batman Brave and the Bold, which had a nice, fun, more comedic, but fun atmosphere to it. I was also talking to a friend of mine who's a big Masters fan. He's like, you know what they should do? They should just go back to the original mini comics, which is where He-Man is just a straight up barbarian, and the whole Prince Adam thing is not a part of it. And I'm like, that might be the way to go. Just do the mini comics. I don't know, but whatever ideas are out there, they're better than what we got on Netflix on Friday. I will say that for sure. So that is all I have for you now. Thanks again, everybody, for watching. I don't know when I'm going to come back and do another one of these. I still want to do my WCW live stream. I'm still in the process of like finishing up making my notes and watching all the 97 pay-per-views. And I want to do something for the 2000 WWE pay-per-views as well. So you can expect to see those in the next couple weeks or months or whatever. But again, I'm not back to doing regular videos. It's just I'll appear when I appear. And it'll be a magical, wonderful experience whenever I do. But that is all I have for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later.